You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
Men do not menstruate.
Some women have penises, right? Some men have vaginas.
Oh man, you don't want a grandkid? Oh man, well dude, you're a weak man, dude.
LGBTQIA+++, and then we included men who dress up like women and mock women, like influencer Dylan Mulvaney.
Everything Manly Podcast is a place where men can come to be taught and encouraged to think and act like men in a world where men are being feminized. John and Tommy are two men who want to encourage men how to think and act in a feminized world. All right, everybody, welcome to another Everything Manly Podcast. John, are you ready for this?
I don't know if I am or not, but I'm ready to give it a shot. The subject is important, so
it is, and I think we should do our best. And the topic that we're going to be addressing is political.
Yep.
We're going to be dealing with Kamala Harris, what she believes, the policies that you and I have been digging for to look at what she actually believes, and then we're going to look at what Trump believes as best we can tell, and we're also going to not briefly, it's however long we want it to be.
Right.
The past 7 years in the political scene here in America, and from there we will see where this podcast goes. But the political landscape is definitely one is against the other, and there seems to be very, very little common ground.
Right. Yeah.
And what we are hopefully going to try to do in this podcast is be as bipartisan as we can, but at the same time, I'm not going to be bashful for who I think the best candidate is.
Yeah.
And let's just talk about what's going on the past 7 years in politics.
Well, we're definitely in an interesting time. We've seen, even in the impeachment trials, the things that took place when Trump was in office prior.
Yeah.
It's unique in that I don't know how often this happens, but we're seeing him run for the third time. You don't normally see.
Yeah.
You don't normally see that. So that's
Yeah.
different. We've seen an assassination attempt.
Yep.
We've
had the classified documents,
right.
Them raiding his home, 34 at minimum felony counts.
Yeah.
We've had lawfare. Well, that is lawfare against him, and also with RFK Jr. coming out,
right,
suspending his candidacy and giving a long, detailed speech on how that every state that's a battleground state, when they brought these petitions, millions of them, that people had signed, the DNC would follow behind
and sue him. Yeah, and North Carolina was one of those states.
Really?
Yeah, so he won against North Carolina, but that was one of the things they did as well. And they were saying they felt like that he didn't have enough signatures based on some technicality. They were doing everything they can to get him off because I guess he was doing a separate party as the We the People party.
Not an independent.
As an independent.
Oh, as an independent.
Well, no. So they were like, well, you should have been an independent.
Oh,
and
okay.
Like you met the rules as an independent, but not over here. It was a real technicality, and so like the judge instantly was like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter. It was all null and void because he walked away. But I'm saying there's still stuff even in the last month that have just lawsuit after lawsuit. So the system is rigged.
What I'm noticing with the mainstream media, when I mean mainstream media, MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, all these big news outlets.
Yeah.
Not always Fox News, but really a lot of MSNBC and CNN. That when something is said, for example, Tucker had this podcast probably 2 weeks ago with these two doctors on there, and they were giving just statistical data.
Right.
Obesity's up 50%. Autism is 1 in 22 kids in California, 1 in 35 in America. Heart disease is through the roof. Cancer is through the roof. And they're suggesting the data is being linked. The culprit is being linked to processed foods. That we are one of the sickest nations in the world because we have the most processed foods, and the stuff that they're putting in our foods makes it addictive, makes us sick. And that's all they were saying. And now RFK Jr., he's speaking against it also. And now I think it was CNN, or I have to look and see which news outlet. They've put out an article saying, is processed foods really that bad for you?
Right. Yeah.
You know, but the data's
Yeah.
backing it up.
Yeah.
And at the same time, so as I was looking at that article, I couldn't help but think, okay, when any truth is spoken that data is behind, the news media, the big mainstream news media, when they kick against it, you can say, well, that's just confirmation that it's probably true. You know?
Yeah.
So,
And I don't know all of RFK's positions. I know he has obviously liberal background.
Sure.
He's definitely was a Democrat.
Yeah.
For years, his family connections, but
Sure.
but I also believe let these guys speak,
please.
and then vote your conscience and let the American people have some say. Versus trying to manipulate everything that we hear.
Sure.
We're only getting to hear certain things.
Yes.
I think that's where it's bad. I mean, I may think the guy's crazy.
Yeah.
But at least let him speak his position.
Yes.
And then you can evaluate. And I think that's the fair way of doing it.
Yes.
But that's not what our culture's doing. And, our kids, that like I think about my children who are now, I've got one that's, able to vote. And, I'm just thinking that's the future. That's what she has to evaluate, is those kind of things. And so I'd rather us have freedom of speech.
Amen.
And let these guys just say their piece. And if you're crazy, you're going to vote it down in the ballot box.
Amen.
And that puts an end to it. So
Yeah. And that is the foundation of, or part of the foundation of what America is founding on, is freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to speak your mind. And I think that's how we should be viewing this election in a real sense, that this election is vitally important because who we put in office will allow us to either have those freedoms taken from us more, or who we put in office may allow those freedoms of speech to continue.
Right.
And so that's why it's so important. Yeah. So let's look at briefly what let's just flip. Who should we pick? Kamala Harris first or Donald Trump? I tell you, let's pretend it's like a debate. We let Kamala go
that's
first.
right. Give Miss Harris
All right. So
first.
let's just briefly look at what Miss Kamala Harris, what as far as we could find on the internet, and if you found something that contradicts what I'm saying, please let me know. We're going to look at where she stands on immigration, homosexuality and gender, abortion, and this unrealized capital gains tax. I find it very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, it won't affect you unless you are in the higher ups in your income. I think you got to be having in millions, but there's still people who have that type of money.
Sure.
And I don't think they should pay more tax any more than anyone else should pay tax. I mean, they work hard to make the money they make. That's the beauty of America. That's capitalism.
Yeah.
That's a constitutional republic, not a democracy.
That's
But
right.
anyway.
Yeah.
So-
That is correct. Yeah.
yeah. So let's look at what she believes in immigration. So BBC, pretty fair news outlet, on March 24, 2021, President Joe Biden tasked Kamala Harris with tackling the influx of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border. Some people say, well, she's the border czar. I don't care what the title is, but that happened March 24, 2021. And as far as I can tell, and I looked it up on Snoops, that is the case, that did happen on March 24, 2021. Matter of fact, I'll have these links on the podcast. If anyone wants to click on the links, you can go and look at the articles yourself.
Right.
Now, I think this is a very conservative number, but Snoop's saying since that day and February 22nd, 2024, 7.2 million illegal immigrants have come into America since that date. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, the border is secure. That's what we were assured, unless you live at the border,
Sure.
But the thing with this immigration issue is always been about this is not about compassion, right? This is about votes. This has always been about votes. This has been about, getting people into the country, not because we're concerned about their health, their welfare, their where they're coming from, and we're just doing this because we're just a gracious, people. That's not from an administrative perspective. Administration didn't think that. They're like, well, these are potential future voters. So clearly that's what's going on here. And I think that without a doubt, the party of the Democrats have led to very loose immigration, enforcement.
Sure.
It's one thing to have a bunch of rules, but if you don't enforce them,
Yeah,
So
well,
and that's kind of part of the spin, right? Is to say, oh no, we have some of the most effective rules there are. Well, that's great. I mean, like in your own house, you might have great rules, but if you don't enforce them, it doesn't matter. And I think that's what we're seeing. And it's one of those things. As a country, we look at it and we know this is happening.
Yeah.
And so we got to deal with it. It's got to be something we deal with. And the question becomes in the future, which of these candidates do we think is going to handle that better?
Yeah.
I know what it was like a few years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it slowed down. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't nothing, but it slowed down. Yeah. And for those bordering states and things, I think they saw a difference. So that's a valid concern.
Sure. And then so where Trump stands on immigration, he claims he will keep building the wall as a barrier between Mexico and the U.S. And there's a long article on that, actually a statistical analysis from Politico. That's usually a very liberal
right
website and media outlet that they gave the statistical analysis of how immigration was down during the Trump administration.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to, if you want to come to this country, I have friends who are in this country legally.
Sure.
And they have to go through very strenuous visas and continually get them updated every year, every 6 months or so. And they're here because of they're on education. And I'm fine as an American having someone come into this country as long as they gone through a process.
Right.
I mean, anyone who just opens their borders and goes, "Hey, come on in." Who in their right mind would do that?
No nation, right?
Exactly.
So the border's an imaginary fence, but
it is.
But it's got to stand for something, or else there's no nation. There's got to be boundaries, and the issue is illegal immigration. I mean, nobody's upset about people coming here for a better life. It's the illegal side of the immigration that bothers the American worker, or the American, safety of the American public, things like that.
And here's what drives the average American, because you and I are an average American. I mean, we're middle class people.
Right.
That you look in California, and the California Senate has just passed this bill.
Yeah.
They're going to give illegal immigrants $125,000 loans for homes.
Yeah. It was up to 150.
Up to 150.
Yeah.
So if you are in this country illegally, you can now qualify for a $150,000 home loan. That makes no sense to me. There are probably Americans who can't even get a $150,000 home loan.
Yeah.
And how does this work? If they decided to skip country, how's the bank going to default on that loan? Who are they going to hold accountable for it?
Sure.
Because if I default on my mortgage, guess what?
Yeah.
I'm going to be held accountable for it.
Sure.
Because I'm American.
Yeah.
So just there's so many. When you start talking about this issue, there's so many things that are flawed in the thinking process, and it really, I think some of what it's become, it's become a political football, in a sense of, well, we're going to see how much we can do just to show how different we are from Republicans. Or maybe I'm wrong on it. Maybe they're truly, genuinely trying to help people, but that's not the way to help people. The way to help people is to make sure they're coming into this country the right way and are committed to working hard.
Well, in the California issue, you've got this policy, I guess, was already in place for helping people get started, almost like a first-time home buyer assistance.
Like the
what's crazy is that $150,000 is like down payment money. in
For a house.
in California.
Because a house is $400,000 or $500,000.
You know what I'm saying? So they're not saying, they're just going, that's down payment money. But what they just voted to change was that citizenship is no longer a requirement to apply.
And that's crazy.
So that's what the difference was, that they were like, we're trying to help people. And then what California said was, at least I think they've got two a Senate and some kind of an assembly.
Yeah.
But what they were saying was they got to pass it to the next one, which is it's a supermajority. So it's pretty much as good as done. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, okay, we're going to take out that requirement so that citizenship is not required to receive benefit. Again, that's pushing an agenda that's saying it's an incentivizing thing, right? To welcome, come on in. We're going to give you somewhere to go, somewhere to stay.
Now you
and if once you start that slippery slope, you say, okay, well, if I don't have to be a citizen to have a home, then I don't have to have a citizen. I don't have to be a citizen to vote.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, the end game is to say that those limitations shouldn't be placed. If you're just in the country, you qualify.
And so when people heard you speak in the beginning, John, and would say, well, how can you jump to that conclusion, John, and say it's been about votes? It's about votes. It makes complete sense.
Yeah.
I've got a mortgage. Mm-hmm. Why can't I vote?
I'm probably paying some kind of property tax at that point.
Why can't I vote? I've got a home address.
Right, exactly.
In San Diego, why can't I vote in San Diego?
And thankfully, West Coast politics isn't always East Coast politics, but those big things in big cities trickle down, and that's the point. It's always been like that. So stuff trickles down, and it's just a matter of coming downstream long enough, it'll happen. So I think on immigration, that's I think there's an openness there for the Harris campaign.
Yeah.
I would say they're going to be lax on those things.
Yeah.
I mean, everything I've read, everything I see. What little bit they do say, they don't say a lot publicly about it. She hasn't yet.
Do you know, that when you go to her website, there's not even a policy section?
Right.
All you have is a donate button, a donate section. You have some information of her as a kid.
Yeah. You
have some information on walls, and that's it.
But we do have a policy section because we've seen it for 3.5 years.
Now here you go meddling again.
No. I'm just saying. I mean,
it's true.
And in fairness, that's the thing. Because you say, well, we know it's no need to ask where you stand. Like we've seen because you stood in line with, understandably, with your administration.
Sure.
I mean, she's not the vice president because she opposed Biden. She was there because she was in favor of the things he was in favor of, and so
exactly.
And so whether you like those things or not, you got to say, well, we know where you kind of stand.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't change now.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, she's trying to.
Which is really silly. I mean, she's acting like it's a new day. Things are going to change first day in office, but where have you been for 3 years?
And that makes me feel like, and unless we may talk about this more as we go along the podcast. Do these people think the average American, and so this is Everything Manly podcast, the average American male, even the average American is stupid?
Is that dumb, yeah.
Are we idiots?
Yeah.
That we're going to sit here and let you lie to us without us going, no. Right. Look at your past record. Sure. Look at what you've been saying up to 2 weeks ago. I mean, so for example, and I don't want to get on a tangent, but this is our podcast, so we can if we want, I guess.
You can do what you want, right?
Yeah, so 5 weeks ago, Biden's as sharp as a tack.
Right.
I mean, I think Morning Joe on MSNBC, he says, I've never seen Joe Biden sharper. And he does the debate.
Sure.
And after the debate, I just don't know if Joe Biden's fit for office. I mean, do they think we are idiots? I mean, that is nothing but propaganda and gaslighting, trying to gaslight somebody. So anyway, if you're listening to this, you're smarter than that.
Sure.
I don't want this to be bash Kamala Harris. I really don't. I just want us to be honest with what's out there.
Just think through the reality.
Sure.
Like these are things that you can see. We're not picking.
Sure.
Random. I mean, these are just big policy issues. Yep. And be honest with yourself about it. And it's hard to believe that you would be probably in intimate connection with the president for 3 years and be totally surprised that that he was in the condition he was in a few weeks ago.
Exactly.
Like, there's no way that, it just doesn't make sense to anybody.
And we
Even if it was the other way around.
Sure.
You're in
If it was-
office with Trump.
Yes.
3 years later, you go, oh, surprise, he's not really up to speed. Like, clearly they knew.
yes, and we all knew, we all could see it.
And we could see it, and we were just constantly being told, no, you're just seeing it wrong, and this is what's so frustrating. And now that it's in the
Correct.
open, we're supposed to just forget it all and move on, just forget it and move on. So,
The American people aren't.
but the
just-
people are smarter than that.
Yeah, exactly, because you got hardworking Americans who have to work for their money and work hard to care for their families, and they get tired of getting fed a bill of goods. Well, one place that she is not hidden in what she views is the homosexuality gender identity issue. This was a quote directly from an article when talking about Proposition 8 when it was trying to be passed in California. When she was Attorney General, she refused Proposition 8, which gave marriage between a husband and a wife.
Right.
So when it was banned, when it banned same-sex marriage in California, and as soon as it was overturned, she officiated the first same-sex marriage.
Yeah.
So we know where she stands. When she launched her campaign, one of the first places she went was Drew Paul's drag race, that TV show, and
That's your favorite show, right?
I watch it all the time.
That's what I was thinking.
But it's pushed all over our Roku page and stuff, so you can't help but see it. But she shows up there, and so she definitely has not hidden what she views about that, and neither has Biden. I mean, they're hanging the LGBTQ flag from the White House. They're draping it in rainbow colors. So this is something she definitely doesn't hide from at all. During her tenure as Vice President, Harris has spoken out against conservative states and has that have banned gender-affirming care for transgender youth, and the advocates for the trans equality recently endorsed her to run for president. We'll have the link for the article. You can read on this. And we've already did a podcast last week on this. So we don't have to.
Yeah, but I mean, even the same-sex marriage unions, whatever that happened there, of course, it trickled down. North Carolina had them. We went through all that stuff, and then it's been years ago, and eventually federally it come out. It's all legal now. That's fine. We can't change that on a federal level. But now we're down to this gender-affirming care stuff, and this is a big deal because this is a policy issue that's very current, where you have, I think, two stark contrasts in administrations.
Yes.
Where I think even in some ways Trump has softened on his stance on some of the homosexual things. Where like personally he may have really strong opinions, but he doesn't seem to be pushing some of the things that he did a few years ago as boldly. But I think even Trump is one of those who says very clearly, these underage gender affirming type things, these surgeries, they've got to stop. And so I think there's no doubt, this is not picking one over the other, it's saying they're two contrasting positions.
Yeah, and as we talked about Raleigh Gaines in our first episode with the Olympics, right? The craziness that went on there. Trump has definitely spoken out very clearly on his policies.
Yeah.
You can go to his webpage and see this, that he does not want transgender people in the military. Can you imagine if we had 80% transgender people in the military, what type of military that would be?
Well, we've got 0.01% of the population.
Exactly.
So whatever the number is, very small.
That'll never be possible.
It
right?
wouldn't be
That
very
80%.
possible, I wouldn't think.
Yeah.
But
it would be a confused mess.
It would be.
A confused
It would
mess.
be.
But so he doesn't want transgenders in the military. Praise the Lord for that. He does. As what I could find on articles, he doesn't even want same-sex unions to be legal. But maybe he's waffling a little bit.
I think he personally feels that way.
Okay.
But I think it's one of those. I think what the Republicans have figured out is if they want to win, they don't publicly say some of the things they might feel, and that may be wrong or right. But I think that's what they're doing. Because this last election, I think, that's kind of one of the things they figured out. These really, really hard positions on these things, those center of the road, these independent types, just they got their feelings hurt, and so they were trying to. I think they're being pragmatic. Okay. But I don't think it changes how he feels. I just think he's being more pragmatic.
That's why I would never be good in running for political office.
Well, yeah, guys like us aren't going to be that. You're not very political, man.
No. But so you are definitely right on that.
Yeah.
On this one policy issue, definitely Harris and Trump, they definitely go in opposite
they're not
directions.
even close.
Not even
Yeah,
close.
not even
Yeah.
close.
And same thing with abortion.
Yeah.
They had a vasectomy mobile unit and abortion mobile units near the DNC Convention Center in Chicago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Making a statement.
Yep.
Making a statement. So you had, I read an article about it, and legitimate news source. I want to say it was CBS or NPR. Somebody was there reporting at the DNC, and I mean they were just quoting the doctors that were there, talking about how wonderful they thought it was to, be able to have this care available. Right, a block or two away, people could walk up. So.
And right here on this policy divergent. It's diverging, right? Trump, at minimum, says that the states need to deal with this issue, which
Sure.
I think that's how it's going to end anyway.
It should be,
is
yeah.
in the individual states. But as you look at this and you think through this, you need discernment people who are listening, men who are listening, women who are listening. You need to have discernment, because what this is, how they are sneaking this in under your conscience radar if you aren't thinking about this clearly. Basically, they're saying death is promoted as women's choice.
Oh, yeah.
Or woman's choice.
Mm-hmm.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Some states, they can murder babies right up until basically they're born.
Mm-hmm. It's a reproductive health care issue.
Oh, that's worded so lovely.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's all about reproductive health care, that kind of thing.
But so they forget it. I think you and I were talking the other day when we were watching the girls play volleyball. We were talking about this issue. But what about the reproductive one in the womb? What about the little
girl,
woman?
the little girl that's unborn?
Yeah. What about the little woman in the womb?
Yeah, right.
What about the little boy in the womb?
Sure.
What about the future father in the womb or the future mother in the womb? And so it's once you begin talking about it logically and even scientifically, because DNA backs us up now.
Sure.
So you need discernment so badly in this day and age to be able to discern how they're moving the smoke in the mirrors to try to deceive you here. This is not about women's choice or women's health care. This is about murder versus life.
And the push has been that one party is going to take away rights and the other party is going to affirm those rights. But the truth of the matter is those rights are still there. Like, you can travel all over the United States and receive an abortion if you choose to.
Whether we like it or not.
Right, you're right. Regardless of how I feel about it, that right is still available. And you could have done it at the DNC in a mobile clinic had you chosen to do that, which is bizarre, but you could have. And I'm assuming that's medical through a pill, not, probably surgery. But I'm assuming they were probably doing it like that, whatever. Who knows? So the point is to say, well, no, they're taking away your rights. No, what they've done is they've said these rights are going back to the states, which I think would have been the right call all along. Anytime the federal government gets involved, it just screws stuff up. Yeah, in any area of life. And so this in particular, anytime you have a federal ruling that tries to overrule states, it's not a good thing. And I think the people of individual states, the way our country is designed, should, if you don't like what North Carolina's rules are, you can move. We have the freedom to get on an interstate and go to the next one.
I love it.
So
that's true.
I mean, and so I think that, to me, those options are available. You haven't had those things taken away. Now that's just the legal side of it, but the spiritual side of that is to say, like you've been saying, and that is that there's two people to consider here. This isn't this isn't the right of the mother alone. It's the right of the unborn as well. But when you don't acknowledge personhood, and you don't acknowledge that that's an actual being, then it makes it a whole lot easier to take the position that someone like Ms. Harris takes. Wow. Because if you can compartmentalize that and say, okay, that's not a person, then it is your choice. Do what you want to. Sure. But it's not just your body. It is another body.
Amen.
But again, that's a
image bearer of God.
It is, and it's a theological thing. Yeah. But I also think now, take that out of the equation. You go, okay, at least in a scientific sense, we know this is a completely unique individual.
Amen.
And now we're fighting about when does life begin, trying to determine those things with heartbeat laws, things like that. So that question is going to keep moving, but the Republicans are never going to take away you'll live in a country that always has the right that you can go kill a baby if you want
Sadly.
to. And at the same time, the Democrats aren't going to protect it anymore. That's already protected.
Yeah.
So for those voters who this is like their single issue that says, well, because you took my rights away, I can't cast my vote for you. I just think that's a misguided position.
And I'm going to put my cards on the table. I think we need to completely abolish it. I think we need to get rid of it from conception all the way up to birth. And I think the individual states have that power to do that.
Right. And that may be the way it goes.
Yeah.
Eventually. We never thought it would have changed at the Supreme Court level either.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm of the generation that I've never known it any other way.
Yeah.
I was a child of the 70s, man, and that was a thing.
Yeah.
And so I've never lived in a time where it was ever changed or different. So my generation following me, they may find it differently.
Also, let's talk about simply rule of law during the Black Lives Matters riots with George Floyd. I think there's a distinction in policy on what Biden and Harris stand for and what Donald Trump stands for.
I'd agree.
Yeah. I don't want to misspeak here, but I definitely think that they would allow it to go on, and Trump would not allow it to go on if he had his way.
Right.
Because there was a time, I think, when he was in office, he had to send in National Guard.
I can't remember, maybe.
I think it was out in Seattle or something.
There were so many things going on that year all over the country, right? So much going on.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
But it causes us, we have to be able to understand with discernment that thieves can't be considered victims. But that's really where we are as a culture.
In California, you can.
Yeah, you can. I think
What
it's
is that, like under $1,000?
Yeah, go at it.
Just go after it, right?
It may be a misdemeanor.
Right.
But what you're finding in real life, these misdemeanors aren't even getting probation. And definitely not getting jail time.
Sure.
Because it's a misdemeanor. And so if it's under 1,000 or 950, Mr. Henry's store, they just came and robbed $600 worth of items.
Big deal.
Sorry, Mr. Henry, you're out of luck.
Let it go.
Too bad, too sad.
Yeah.
Wake up tomorrow and try to get some more.
Yeah, and that's another undeniable thing. That's not just a talking point, but you can look at in the areas,
real life.
In the areas that have this going on. There's stores that are closing up shop on this street or closing up in this town because they're like, it's not profitable.
Sure.
And so that's not a thing you just deny and say, oh, you guys are just making that up. No, that's real life for some people. There's business owners that are thinking, I'm not going to keep doing this. I'm not going to risk my employee's life. I'm not going to. It's not worth it.
I'll give you a real life story. After the riots happened in Raleigh, Mel and I, we were on a date, and I said, let's just drive down and see how bad it is.
Yeah.
And so we go down there. A lot of the buildings on Fayetteville Street are completely boarded up. And we pull over and we just begin walking down Fayetteville Street, just looking around. And there was this one barbershop that they had pulled the boards off of it. And there was a lady cleaning up outside. And I walked in and I said, I want you to know I'm truly sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. And she looked at me. She's like, they have no idea how long we've had this business. And they destroyed a black business. They had no idea. Yeah. But yet here they are, what they leave us with. Look at all this mess. And she's like, can you help me move this? And so Mel and I helped her move some chairs around, helped her move some barbershop chairs around. They were heavy. I didn't want her pulling on them by herself. She was an older lady. But as Mel and I left that situation, I said, the majority of the American people miss that. They don't understand that. All they see is what's on the news and these poor people. No, these thugs and these thieves came in and they ruined some of their own ethnic groups' businesses. Not just whites, they came through and they just had the freedom to destroy whatever they wanted to destroy for days and weeks.
With little fear of prosecution.
Yes.
And that's what motivated it.
Yeah. Roy Cooper put up some fences around the State House.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
Yeah, so I think that's true, that and it kind of goes back even to the immigration thing, but even to this too that you're talking about, and these the robberies and the things that are happening in these different pockets of America.
Yeah.
Is I think you've got two different visions for law and order.
Yeah.
You know, and how that works. And I think that's another contrast where you see probably really strong support on one side for, you know, law enforcement and those kind of things and standing behind those folks. And on the other side, what seems to be happening is almost a manipulation of the legal system to move things forward for purposes of power.
Yeah.
So you hinted at, you know, lawfare, kind of a new word that we've sort of started using.
Yeah.
But this idea of, well, we'll use the law in our favor for these things. But that doesn't protect, you know, suing Donald Trump or suing RFK, that doesn't change my life.
No.
But the stuff that happens on the street where you've got police officers who are thinking, I'm going to get out of this because I'm not being supported.
Yeah.
I think that's crazy. So I think in my mind, if I were casting a vote in a clear conscience, I would want to vote for a candidate that supported those kind of people that are most of the time for minimal pay trying to take care of their community. And I think that's, you know, if somebody were to ask me about it, that'd be my opinion on that.
And honestly, I think if we took a poll of common sense Americans,
Yeah.
they would be right where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't care what political party you are.
Right.
Who doesn't want a safe environment where you can go and take your wife out to dinner?
Sure.
Who doesn't want a safer environment for where you can go and take your kids and have a decent time at a park?
Right.
I mean, who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
And you have to ask yourself, you have to discern, listen, and think about, were these the candidate you're getting ready to vote for, were they supporting this insanity that took place during the BLM riots? And if they were, then basically they were saying thieves need to be victims. And listen, I know there was one guy that at one time I respected, but he said, you need to understand why these people are doing that. And I said to myself, okay, I hear the question you're asking, why the people are doing it. But at the end of the day, I think that's the wrong question to ask. You need to be asking, who are they hurting when they do it? They're not only hurting themselves, because they're destroying their own communities, but they're hurting the people who run the businesses. They're hurting the people who have poured 20, 30 years into these businesses to get them to flourish and grow. So anyway, I'm not going to go any further down that rabbit hole. But
I think you've got a point. I mean, there's two different views of that. I mean, I think from these top tier candidates, I mean, there's probably two different opinions of how to do that. You know, do you support law enforcement or do you just manipulate law enforcement to your ends?
Yeah.
And I think we've seen for the last couple of years as a manipulation of law enforcement. And you've got these law enforcement folks who are used to chain of command.
Sure.
Who are like, I'm just doing what I'm told.
Yep.
They told me I got to go do this. I'm going to, you know, and that's what's happening. And I think that's unfair to a career person.
Yeah.
You know, he says, man, I'm already in, you know, what am I going to do? And now I think you've got a potential to vote again. And that's the beauty of America. You know, don't like it, wait a couple of years, vote again. And you may be able to vote for somebody who stands in line with these folks versus against them, I think.
Yeah. All right, so let's look at as best we could find, best I could find, we talk about taxes. This is the last category before we get to some of the things that were said at the RNC and some of the things that were said at the DNC. And we're going to try to filter through some of those.
Yeah, sure.
Those lies.
Right.
That's the only way you can say it. It's just lies. All right. So Trump with taxes, he says he's going to, continue his tax cut with workers and no tax on tips. You know, chameleon Kamala. I hate to call her that, but so I didn't hear her talking about no taxes on tips until Trump began to say something, and all of a sudden she began to try to change her tune on this. One thing I've caught interest the past few days here is this unrealized capital gains tax of 25%. So if, let's say you're investing $100,000, if it goes up $50,000, and you have you're certain level of income, then you have to pay 25% of that $50,000, which is what they call unrealized capital gains tax. That's insanity.
Which that's a policy position that the Harrises she's proposed it, I think.
She's proposed it.
Tossed the idea out there.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that's kind of an us versus them thing, because the argument would be, well, this is only for top tier earners because they deserve to get punished
Isn't that crazy?
for being top tier earners, and that's a kind of cast against the Trump campaign, who they argue is all for the the elite.
Yeah.
So I don't listen. I don't relate to either one of them. They got more money in the bank than I've got. Either one of them, I mean, so there's no illusion here that we're
Sure.
common and we share that. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
they're in a different league.
Yes.
But I think that the idea that you punish the folks that are doing well, who very likely are employing the people like me,
Yeah.
like that's a crazy idea. Like it's just
Exactly.
crazy, and it's the basis for it is I think it's jealousy, or I don't know what motivates them, but
Sure.
it seems like that's the way that every time these little campaigns come up, it's all us versus them, and I'm thinking these are people making jobs, man. They're
Exactly.
somebody's running these big businesses, and somebody's taking a risk, and
Yep.
I don't know. I just think they've messed up on pursuing these guys as if they're going to be the revenue makers that we need. That if we just can tax them a little bit more,
Isn't that crazy?
But we're still in trillions of dollars of debt. So,
Trillions.
Hitting this CEO guy for 25% on some mansion is not going to change that.
Yeah.
There's got to be other policy changes. And
Amen.
but this is like red meat to your base, right? Yeah, stick it to the man, get the rich guy. And I just think that's I mean, again, we're not that crazy, we're not that dumb.
Exactly.
Like you got to know. Like I've always worked for somebody. And then eventually, as I got to be an adult, I started working for myself. But prior to that, I mean, I always worked for somebody else, and I didn't get mad because they owned the company. I didn't get mad because they told me what to do. Like I was just,
He was
if
my
I wanted
boss.
to do that, then I had to be my own boss.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
the incentive, right? And but we're trying to raise a culture of people that just want handouts,
Yeah.
and that's probably where taxes like that would go to. Ultimately, it's not paying off debt. It's just going to be for more social programs.
Wow.
For more handouts.
Yeah.
We'll take it from this guy and we're going to give it to somebody else, So.
Wow. It's so true.
Sounds kind of like socialism, but just saying.
Have we already talked about Mark Zuckerberg on? Oh, so we have not talked about. Well, let's talk about that. This is just recent. I think like the past 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
So this is, I guess, this will be the category of the Democratic National Convention and the whole Biden-Harris campaign and some of the lies they've been caught up in. So they came to Mark Zuckerberg, and he's admitted now. Zuckerberg is how you say your name. Yeah. He's just admitted that the Biden-Harris administration pressured Facebook to censor Americans. So in other words, if you posted something about COVID on your Facebook, on your Facebook feed, it got suppressed.
Right.
The guy who runs Facebook admitted
it, this past
that
week.
it's suppressed, that he suppressed it, and he should have kicked back against it more. So they censored Americans, and also he admitted that Facebook throttled down the Hunter Biden laptop story. And that was all just what? Russian disinformation. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And it feels like we're living in it feels like we're living in the Twilight Zone, but I know we're not.
Right.
We're living here in this reality, but I have to come back to it. John, do they think we are this stupid? Right. Now the president of the company admits that they did this. And so what are they going to do now? Oh, no, we didn't do that.
Right.
Or were they going to try to just not praise God for X, that Musk has this platform that you can get this information from?
Sure.
So if you're not on, I'm not a X all the way person, but I am on X, and I can tell you I can get decent information from X. I can get both sides of the story. And you won't get that on other platforms.
Yeah.
So
they'll definitely, Zuckerberg will be the scapegoat. And as you say, there's always going to be the ability to cover yourself and say, well, we didn't tell him to do that, but he did it. It wasn't on us. I mean, there's no paper trail for that one.
Yeah.
So I think that it was interesting he admitted it. I think, again, it's one of those things where we go, we live through it and we go, this doesn't seem right. Like whatever's on these social media platforms doesn't seem to be giving the whole story.
The whole story,
and what
yeah.
we know now is that
exactly.
Yeah, you're right. We didn't give you the whole story. So, and I think moving forward, that's the way things will continue to be. But and that's why, again, part of the podcast is to say, let's be discerning. Let's think through these things as men. let's think about how do we guide these conversations in our home and our family,
Yes.
in our community even.
Yes.
That, when I look at like the biblical accounts of biblical stories, and a lot of times men were the guys who were sitting at the city gates,
They were.
right? And there's these guys that are just sitting there, and it's just like a blurb in the scripture. It's just a little phrase.
Yep.
But the implication was that these were men who had seen stuff. They had some
Yes.
wisdom, and you would go there and settle matters. You
Same
talk things
with,
out.
with Boaz.
Yeah,
He went to the city
You
gate.
go to city gate, and so I look at that and I say, this is kind of the where we need to have some men at the gate.
Yeah.
Sitting at the gate, having these conversations when people come up and say, "Yeah, I've thought this through, or I've thought about it at least," and I'm not just blowing it off and shirking my responsibilities. And so I think that's what we're trying to encourage guys to do, even when it comes to something touchy like politics.
Yeah.
Is to say, you don't have to agree with us, but at least think it through,
Yeah.
and then be able to communicate it to those you love.
And you know what? I take great courage from this, that at least he was willing to stand up and be truthful.
Yeah.
Even if it's years later,
Sure.
at least he sees, man, I need to stand up and be a man. I need to say this. I need to be truthful about this. And who knows, maybe Trump's assassination attempt, because he seemed like
Yeah.
that really stirred Mark.
Yeah.
That, man, I haven't seen anything like that in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and maybe Elon Musk has inspired him to do stand up and have a backbone. Who knows? I don't know. But anyway, I figured we needed to definitely talk about that. And well, that's a great illustration. It is. We need men at the city gates being willing to dialogue and talk about these issues.
Yeah.
All right, so we will give you a link to Kamala Harris is her full speech at the DNC. If you want to listen to it, please do. So one thing that I heard at the DNC, I thought this was quite comical. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony that was there. So they said Trump would try to imprison
His opponents.
I'm sorry.
As they're panning to him sitting in a courtroom for the last 6 months,
So Trump would try to imprison his political opponents.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't help but almost just laugh out loud.
Yeah.
I mean, what if, and once again, I am not MAGA. I'm just
Yeah,
not
sure.
that dude.
Yeah, me
I'm
either,
going to pull the trigger for Trump. I am. I'm going to vote for him.
Right.
Because I think he lines up more with my religious convictions, and I think he can do more for our country. But to really say that with a straight face shows me and shows you and shows every man who's listening with a discernment radar, every person who's listening with a discernment radar, that they are trying to pass lies as righteousness. And so what do I mean by that? They're standing there at this podium saying, I'm the righteous one, and he doesn't need to put me in prison. But all along, they're the very ones who are trying to do it.
Yeah.
It's insanity.
Nothing would thrill them more, than to see him in some handcuffs going to a jail cell.
Sure.
We both know he's not going to a jail cell.
Correct.
He's not pulling any time. This guy's a former president.
Correct.
No other former he's not. It's not happening.
Yeah.
This is completely garbage.
Yes.
Whether he's guilty of everything they say he's guilty of, he's not going to jail.
Correct.
I mean, this is a guy who's potentially the next president
Of the
who's going to be
United
in
States of
court when he does his inauguration. I mean, this is the craziest season. None of
Yeah.
it makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so, it's complete hypocrisy. And, the idea that this is like other country stuff, that
Yeah.
you got a leader who puts somebody in prison, that kind of thing. That's not happening here. And in a way it'll work for us is that, Biden is going to stick around long enough to get, everybody off, give pardons to whoever he wants to give pardons to. That's why he's hanging around.
Yeah.
And so give him a couple months and everybody's going to get pardoned.
Yeah.
And Trump's going to sit there and get the same effect if he gets in office. Everybody's going to get pardoned, and you move on about your life. And these two old men are going to golf into to the dust, But yeah, with Miss Harris, man, I don't know. It's just a very, to me, it's insulting because when they say things like that, you have to ask, like, do you really think that we don't see this? But they tell you with a straight face.
With a straight face, with a beautiful smile.
Yep.
They say it with a straight. So don't buy that.
Just be discerning.
Be discerning. Be wise.
Yeah.
Basically, act like men. All right, Trump. The next one I heard there, and we're gonna get to RNC.
Yeah.
We're giving Miss Harris her first shot.
Sure.
Trump is out for himself to do nothing but make money for himself. I heard AOC say this at the DNC.
Yeah.
The man hadn't even taken a paycheck from the White House.
Right.
He gives his paycheck away.
Yeah.
Now, does Trump have his flaws? Oh my goodness, he's got his flaws. Sure. He's got his past. He's got his pride. He's got his arrogance. I was listening to an interview he was having with Dr. Phil today, or 2 days ago, and he was talking about how good he was. I'm like, man, if he could just shut his mouth on his pride, it just makes me want to go throw up in a corner somewhere.
Yeah.
But anyway, Trump. So they're saying Trump was out for himself, but the man hadn't even pulled a paycheck. Do you want to speak to any of that? I mean,
No, I mean, that's self-explanatory. The guy, he doesn't need this job to make money, but it does seem that previous administration has done everything to peddle influence to generate family wealth.
I mean, now that's coming out.
And the more it's coming out, yeah. And you look at that and you go, okay, well, I mean, again, I'm not surprised. I mean, it's what people do.
Yeah.
That's how you start off with nothing and you leave off as super wealthy.
Yeah.
But
not right.
It's not right, but it happens. And so I think we're seeing now that Biden is on the way out, that you're seeing more and more stuff come out that says, okay, maybe some of the things, the man's been around for 50 years in office. There's some things that's been going on behind the scenes to help his family. And so for somebody like Trump, I think that's a false accusation. But even if the guy makes money off of it, it'll be based on popularity or something like that, not because of shady deals.
Great goodness.
Nobody that I have ever known in my lifetime, which is a very limited lifetime, but nobody in my lifetime have I ever seen more investigated than that one guy. I mean, even in the last few months, but I'm talking about just every week is something, and they keep coming up empty, man. Yeah, I mean, they're trying so hard, and so if there was a money thing going on, they'd have come across it by now. Yeah, they just said, hey, here
and they would have been like
they'd have lit him up,
dogs on red meat with that one.
Yeah, they lit him up.
Donald, in the first day of the DNC.
Yeah, this was a funny quote. Yeah,
Donald Trump's name was mentioned 47 times the first day.
Yeah,
and
it's several hundred times by the end of the meeting.
I would imagine so.
I think it was like over 300 times that they talked about him, and then like Biden was mentioned like twice.
Yeah, I think it was 4.
It was at the RNC. Yeah, it was a complete opposite spectrum. Like the point is, like, we're not going to talk about Biden.
Yeah. And so who needs policy when you
got somebody to hate?
Somebody like him to hate. Great.
Yeah, he makes it easy for him. Yeah.
What I find intriguing, I haven't done much research on this, is this whole idea of this Project 2025.
Yeah.
That Trump is behind Project 2025. As best I can tell, I think it's been written by people who will vote for Trump or who have been maybe a part of Trump in the past, but Trump is not directly affiliated with it. Have you looked into it?
Yeah, I haven't seen. Yeah, that's the accusation, is that it has these really radical conservative proposals and Trump is behind it all. And that's what Ms. Harris keeps putting on him. This is your project, and. He's completely denying it, and he even says some of the stuff's crazy. Even he's come out and said, I don't agree with all of this. I've read some of the stuff, but now, does he not know about it? I don't know. That's hard to fathom, right? I mean, here's a bunch of your former people that really, really, really like you. You're telling me somebody didn't make a phone call and say, hey, we're going to put together a policy proposal to give you some guidance. Yeah. Here's the things we really want to see happen. At the end of the day, man, the president's a figurehead. Like in our country, right? I mean, he's a figurehead or she's a figurehead. I mean, the Congress has to pass stuff. The Senate's got to approve stuff. I mean, you can have all the policy proposals you want.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, like Trump's not making that happen.
He's not making the law.
So those kind of things, again, it's just blurring the lines because you talk to people on the street and they'll say, oh, yeah, well, you see what Trump's, this is what Trump's going to do on day one. It's like, Trump's not going to do anything on day, He's going to do what he's permitted to do, and he'll push his limits, I'm sure, and so will Ms. Harris. Yeah. But either way, on these top tier candidates, they're representing everything beneath them. Yeah. And it's those people that get the things done.
Amen. That's true. It's true.
And so I think but I think that for the average person, it's just a voter. The way they sell it is they want you to fear, that if you don't vote for this party, this other person's going to take away this or hurt this or do. And I don't think that's fair to say for either of them. Sure. I think their positions matter. I think they influence the way these things go. But, I'm not losing sleep at night over which of them sitting in office in a couple of months because God's in control.
Amen. It's just not worth it. So if you do want more information on Project 2025, I will have a link. I will have a link on Snoops. You can go and look at that. You know, before we move on to the RNC, at minimum, how Miss Harris has come into her position of attorney. I think it was attorney prosecutor in the state of California.
Yeah,
it's questionable. You know, I don't know all the details, but I do know Willie Brown was a former California Assembly Speaker and San Francisco mayor whom Harris dated in the middle 1990s. Montel Williams, she's seen on video being his right-hand girl. He had one on the left, one on the right. Yeah. So you do your own digging on that.
And then you get Trump dating models, right?
Exactly,
so,
right.
You know what I mean? So
then Trump on
that's
on
the two things they have in common.
Yeah, there you go. That's one common thing they have.
They
right?
can agree on this, right?
They both have morally checkered past.
Exactly.
At minimum.
Yeah.
At
so
minimum.
you're not voting for your next pastor. On either case, I mean,
yeah,
in either way, I mean,
that's
not,
very, very true. Yeah, very.
You don't
true.
have that choice this time.
No, not this go around. Yeah. Not even close. All right, so we got to admit, Trump makes some outlandish claims.
Absolutely.
Great goodness, man. Come on, can you just shut your mouth on this? There's no way you can prove this. I'm telling you, I have the best economy ever. What in the world does that mean?
Maybe. I don't know.
You know what type of research that would have to take place to prove that?
Well, he knows that's the case. Because he knows nobody's going to do that. Just got to take him at his word.
I've got the best economy ever.
Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy. Here's another lofty claim he makes. I had the safest border wall in history of the United States of America. How can you confirm that?
You got to look that up.
Snoops, you think Snoops will have that one?
There's a website for that.
Yeah, the safest wall ever.
Yeah.
Another one. I had the biggest tax cuts of any president in America. Once again, how much research have you done? I mean, does anyone even tell him, Trump, maybe you shouldn't say that? It really just turns into, lack of better terms, just a pissing contest. Really, I mean,
there's no way to handle the guy. They don't know how to. He needs handlers, and they don't know how to handle him. You know,
it's just completely ridiculous. But I have to admit, he does have a policy page on his website.
He does. Yeah.
So if you want to go there and look at what he believes, then go there. I mean, I don't have much more to say. I think what we've sought to do today hopefully has helped people who are listening at least begin to process. They need to put some work in to look at what these people believe. You need to really process the past 7 years and how dumb these political candidates that think you really are. And you're not that dumb. You're not. And hopefully John and I brought some of this to light for you today. We reviewed where Trump stands on immigration, homosexuality and gender, abortion, and taxes. We viewed where Kamala Harris stands on immigration, homosexuality and gender, abortion, and taxes. We talked about some lies we heard from the DNC. We talked about some outlandish claims that Trump's almost makes on a daily basis when he's speaking. Yeah. We've talked about how the media has been pressured by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to suppress your speech on social media. We have talked about in the past 7 years how they have tried to they've impeached him. They've raided his Mar-a-Lago home. They've gave him 34 felony counts. He had assassination attempt on his life. They've thrown out lawfare against him and RFK Jr. We've talked about a lot of things on this podcast. Is there anything that you want to say to kind of put a bow on this podcast before we leave?
For me, just thinking
please.
through this. I mean, for me, I think my concern was to answer the question of the person who says, does it even matter?
Doesn't matter.
Does it even matter if I vote? Because I hear this, and particularly from Christians, I hear Christians who choose not to engage in politics, and they'll say, you shouldn't do that, whatever. And again, I respect that position if that's your position. I've had people tell me, well, you're voting for the lesser of two evils, and I don't want to vote because I'm still voting for the lesser evil, and I don't want to vote for that, whatever that position might be.
Yeah.
And I simply, for my conviction, it's the idea that we have a freedom to vote in this country. That's a privilege. I've been to other countries. You've been to other countries. And some of the places I've been to, that's not really an option. Yeah. And my conviction as a young man came to be that freedom needs to be leveraged for the sake of the gospel. And so whatever I'm about ought to be moving the kingdom purposes further along the road, and God gives us a chance to do that.
Yeah.
And so when I look at these two candidates, I'm not voting for Christian candidates. I'm not even asking about their position necessarily on those things. Trump claims to be a Christian, ? Right?
Exactly.
I mean, who knows? Miss Harris claims to have, I guess she's got various religious backgrounds because
Hindu
of her.
and Christian.
Yeah, Hindu and Christian, I think. Has influences both places. But for me, I'm looking at it going, what are these core values that these people stand for?
Yep.
And then can I vote one way or the other, which will probably become pretty obvious to me, that will help me further kingdom purposes, even if it's only incrementally.
Yeah.
And you say, okay, well, religious freedom is important to me.
Yes.
Do one of these parties stand for one or the other better than the other? I think so.
Yes.
And so I want to vote in a way that goes, well, maybe for the next 3 or 4 years, the church has some more freedom that it might not have in 4 years.
Yeah.
So I'm going to vote that way. I'm not going to waste my vote. I'm going to cast a vote. Same thing on things like sanctity of life. Mm-hmm. Does it matter? It matters for the baby that was saved, right? And so, or those kind of things. And so I look at that and I go, even if it's an incremental thing, I think as believers and as men, particularly Christian men, we have a right to say, we ought to vote. We ought to do this because we love our country. We love, what it represents and the opportunities that are here, but mainly because we're trying to leverage everything we have for the time we have to make it count for the gospel. Yeah. And so that's kind of where I'm at. And the other thing is, this has been said, the Puritans used to say it, and I say it to my people all the time, and that is, God can strike a straight lick with a crooked stick. And so when you talk about, well, this candidate's no good and this candidate's no good, if you are a person that reads the Bible and you happen to look at the Bible, you see all over it that God takes and he accomplishes his purposes with less than perfect people. And so I want to be on the side of that says, hey, let's encourage that. Let's vote with that in mind, that God's sovereign, God rules. This world's not spinning out of control. Yeah. And we say, okay, Romans, you talked about Romans 13, this idea that God sets up people in positions of leadership and power. Yes. Paul tells Timothy we need to be praying for those folks. Amen. He tells that in 1 Timothy 2. He says, make all prayer and supplication for those kind of people. And so we come at it differently than everybody else. The believers come at it differently. And I think that voting matters, and I think it ought to matter. And you might say, well, I don't have influence. Well, not voting is not using your influence. Wow. You do have influence. And so I want to encourage folks to vote. You don't have to vote like I vote. My vote might cancel your vote. Yeah. But it's my vote. Yeah, so I want to do it. I want to encourage folks to do it.
So John just spoke to the Christian. Yeah. So in other words, Christian, get out and vote. Let me speak to someone who's not a believer that may be listening to this podcast. You ought to be tired of being lied to. You ought to be tired of being deceived. And even if you're not a believer, the Lord Jesus does tell us that the truth will set us free. Yeah. These people have been lying to you. They have been deceiving you. And at minimum, when it comes to someone like Donald Trump, he's not a perfect candidate. And he has moral failings. He has arrogance. He has pride. But at minimum, at least with Donald Trump, you know what you're going to get. So I can't tell you how to vote. I'm not going to tell you how to vote. I'm just going to tell you how I'm going to vote. And if that influences you, good. So you ought to be, and you ought to be tired of people thinking that you're an idiot. So that's how I'm just going to speak to you. And you're not. You are a smart person who probably has a job, who takes care of a family, who works hard, who's got his imperfections, who needs a Savior. So if you don't know Christ, I'm going to encourage you to repent and place saving faith in Him, see that you're a sinner and need Him. Yeah. But at the same time, even if you don't accept Christ, be wise with who you're voting for. And don't vote because they're a certain ethnic group. Don't vote because they're a woman. Don't vote because they're a man. Vote because the candidate you're voting for at least stands up and it says, listen, I'm not going to lie to you. Here's what I believe and here's where I stand. So, anyway.
Didn't hide it, yeah.
Yep. All right, guys.
Thank y'all, man.
Until next time, go out and be manly because the world is trying to turn you into a feminized pansy. All right.
Don't be a pansy.
Don't be a pansy, be a man.
That's right.
All right, see you next time.
Thanks, guys.